Empowered Health, a podcast shedding light on how healing is an inside job. Keys to your inner power and total transformation. Discussing wholeness, wellness, and the effects of the mind on the physical and energetic parts of our being. A podcast to support you, moving from fear and pain into wellness and purpose. Belief, hope, connection, energetic keystones for transformation and inner power. Sacred knowledge that inspires us to look within, to find our own unique path. Empowered Health, release and rewire to become what you truly are, strong, whole, and empowered.
One. Welcome to the Empowered Health, Empowered Mind podcast, the keys to empowered and heart-aligned living. This podcast is all about the effects that our mind can have on our health and our ability to thrive. As a naturopathic doctor, I know if we are suffering from brain fog and exhaustion, it's going to be very difficult to go beyond and thrive. So today we have environmental medicine expert Aviad Elgez ND to look at some of the causes and symptoms of toxicity, a licensed naturopathic doctor and a graduate from the Canadian College of Naturopathic Medicine with awards of academic excellence. In 2013, he completed advanced training in environmental medicine and intravenous therapy with Dr. Crinnion. Aviad has spoken at environmental conferences such as the Environmental Health Symposium, where he received an award in 2017 for Solvent Exposure. Welcome, Aviad.
Hi, thank you, Jane. Thank you for having me on your show.
So happy to have you. Aviad, because of your own story, you've become very passionate about helping people with complex health issues that have often been caused by toxic overload. You went from sharp and top of your class to mood changes and some brain fog. Just tell us your story and how you became so passionate about this subject.
Sure, definitely. So basically, my personal experience has been that for me, school has always been pretty easy. My memory, I have almost like semi-photographic memory. So it's been not a problem, just going to school, getting my grades and learning things. And it turns out that towards the end of my graduation from naturopathic school and the first few years when I started my practice, I started noticing a decline in my concentration, my energy, my mood. Everything was sort of falling apart gradually over the years. Whereas before I was, 9 out of 10, 10 out of 10, focus, concentration, it went down to, some days like a 3 out of 10. And, when I was talking to my friends or my colleagues and I saying, okay, this is what I'm going through. Nobody could believe me. They said, no, I always go to you for help. How come, you're coming to me now? And I did everything I could. I explored all the different diagnoses. I went to different doctors, medical doctors, naturopathic doctors, did a lot of the treatments that I won't list them now because we a lot of them, but for years, tried all kinds of things to see what can improve my brain, what's going on. And nothing really worked, 100%. It worked like 20%, 30% improvement, and then kind of went back down. So what happened was it was sort of a gradual decline over about a 5 to 7 year period. And it kind of peaked about 2-3 years after I graduated, and I started taking Dr. Crinnion's course. He's, as you yourself are aware of, he's one of our elders in our community who has passionately driven the environmental medicine field forward, and more than anybody else really that we're aware of, at least in our group of people. I took his course and I realized, wait a second, I have a lot of these things that he's talking about, and I've always been interested in environmental medicine, like heavy metals, toxicity, pollution, chemicals, but we never learned this stuff in school, right? This is not taught in naturopathic school, and this is not taught in medical school. So, it is taught, but it's such a small amount that when you actually learn it, it's not taught. It's missing. So I took his course and I realized, wow, there was so much missing. I can't believe he's getting these kind of results. Let me try it out. So if everything I did before, for all my other treatments, I kind of kept, things the same with my lifestyle, my very clean environmental lifestyle I had before, but I started really cleaning things up on another layer, started doing a lot of the cleansing protocols, like the saunas, the colon hydrotherapy, and with just that focused treatment with his protocols for 2 weeks, I went right back to literally a 10 out of 10 energy. And I stopped doing those protocols more or less after 2 to 3 weeks, and just sort of maintained a foundation of everything that I did beforehand, and what I learned from him. And it lasted for months afterwards. Like, did not drop. And it's been years now, and I'm still fine. I'll occasionally still get some of the, little low brain fog episodes here and there, but there's always a connection to maybe a mold exposure. I'm going to a friend's cottage and there is a moldy environment and I slept there. Then I'm feeling that fogginess all over again for a few days until I sort of reverse that. So for me, it was like a game-changing experience to see that kind of a transition after everything I've tried. And the best part is I applied it to some of my patients so that, I realized, hey, I have these patients who are stuck too. They've seen me for a few years. They've seen multiple doctors. Most of my patients see multiple doctors, medical doctors, naturopathic doctors. They have MRIs, multiple MRIs looking for their neuropathy, cause of their symptoms, for like numbness and tinglings, balance issues, brain fog, fatigue, and then I applied that same experience that I learned from Dr. Crinnion. 1 second, let me just close the window. There is a sound that probably helps you out a little bit. And I applied that same exploration, trying to figure out what is their exposure, something that's in their house, like memory foam exposure or mold, or they did some massive renovations. Or sometimes not even massive, just renovations in their bedroom, and they're sleeping in that off-gassing, but the material was releasing benzene or formaldehyde, and they're breathing it in. And nobody asked these questions. So I started asking these questions, started realizing the timeline matches for these patients of mine, removed the exposure, cleaned things up, and then applied almost the exact same treatments that we did before with them, or even some of the newer ones. And then they suddenly back to normal. Like, we're talking being from a 5 or 8 out of 10 and whatever their optimal health was, to going for years on and off trying different things, then going back up to like a 7 to 10 out of 10 all the time as soon as we remove the exposures. And then that was my aha moment. Okay, this is what we've been missing from our clinical education across the board.
Mm-hmm. It's a big obstacle to cure if you have something like that.
Mm-hmm. Like, if you go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I was gonna say exactly what you said. It's an obstacle to cure.
Yeah.
Like, it's very easy to understand that in 2 simple examples. If somebody has, let's talk about the opposite thing. Instead of having a toxicity, if somebody has a iron deficiency, right? They're deficient in iron. Now they're having all these iron deficiency symptoms like fatigue, brain fog, and so on. Well, you can go ahead and treat it with coffee or any other stimulants that you need, but really the obstacle to cure is you got to get the iron levels up and things improve. The exact same logic applies here. If somebody's living in a moldy basement that they can't smell the mold, they can't see it, it looks beautiful, it's renovated, but there is a moisture issue behind the walls, or they're sleeping in a memory foam mattress that's recently bought and they're sensitive to the solvents that are off-gassing from that, what happens is they go home and they're constantly getting exposure to the mold mycotoxins or to the solvents or renovation off-gassing. And you can do any treatment you want, even pharmaceuticals, antidepressants, or natural products. And all you're doing is just kind of trying to overcome an uphill battle. Like, they're exposing themselves to these toxins, they're feeling sick, brain foggy, neurological symptoms, neuropathy, numbness and tingling, balance issues, and then you try to treat it, but they get a bit better, but then they go home and they sleep in that same environment again. So you're really hitting that same wall over and over again, and you're not realizing, why aren't you getting better results like you are with other patients who are just getting better so much faster?
Yeah. And even with someone like you who is becoming a naturopathic doctor, using all kinds of modalities to get better, and still couldn't get over that hurdle until you cleansed. And you said you did it through sauna?
So the biggest changes I did was I actually started to do significant amounts of saunas. I was doing about 10 sauna sessions over a 2-week period, so about 1 hour, up to 1 hour each, but in 45 minutes to an hour of hot sauna with hot and cold, like cold shower in between, to make sure that I can last properly. And as a quick side note on this, I don't want to forget about this in case we don't miss it. When you do a sauna, you really want to use soap at the end of that sauna, clean soap to wash off the fat-soluble toxins, because some of the toxins are coming out. Not all toxins come out in the sauna. There's a lot of research published in this, but a lot of them are the fat-soluble, persistent pollutants. So if you don't use soap after that sauna, even though you're trying to do good for yourself, it'll just absorb back in. It's kind of like putting oil on your skin, taking a shower, and then letting that oil, and it's not coming off with soap, taking a shower with hot soap, and just using water, that oil will just get reabsorbed into your skin. It's the same thing happens here. So you need to use a good clean soap at the end of your sauna, and that allows you to pull off most of those toxins much better than just doing a sauna.
Yeah.
So I was doing 10 saunas. I did a series of colonics, colon hydrotherapy, and then really cleaned up my diet, like the best I can ever do, with chemical-free, toxin-free, pesticide-free, and took a few supplements to support the detoxification process. And I believe that is the main antioxidants and glutathione support. And I did that really focused, and that changed everything around for me.
Wow. And that was over a 2 or 3 week period.
Yeah.
Was really focused.
Now, yeah. And the main key point you mentioned is I did a whole bunch of things beforehand, right? So I did so many other health supports, like adrenals, right? The gut health, exercise, nutrient support, like vitamin B12, IV nutrient therapy. So I was already in good health. I was just missing that the toxicity picture that was still kind of lingering on from the past for me, to kind of take me to the next level. I have a few patients who within 2 weeks to 4 weeks have achieved what I have achieved as well, like that big transition. But those are the patients who have done a lot as well. But then they just hit that wall, and they just needed that thing to turn things around. But most patients will feel significantly better within 2 to 4 weeks, but maybe not like 100%, but we're talking like 30 to 70% within 2 to 4 weeks, which is, for me, like for the ones who've been hitting that wall for years and suddenly they get a 30 to 70% improvement in 2 to 4 weeks, that's the sign that they're on the right track. And then you keep it going and support them gradually to make more changes in their life and their environment, clean up their environment even more. And over the next few months, they can get to that 75 plus to 100% improvement, and get them back to where they were before they started getting sick.
Right. Yeah. So it depends on what state you're in when you start, and how much more you have to do after. But
yeah,
still, to really focus like that for 2 or 3 weeks would get you some of the way, for sure.
100%. Yeah.
Yeah. Aviad, tell us more, just a little bit more about saunas. Because, was there a certain type of sauna you used, or does it matter?
So the thing with saunas is the main point is you want to sweat. So the best 2 saunas, based on the research, are infrared saunas and the regular dry, a Finnish sauna. And the ones just the stones or just the heat, the dry heat. You don't want to use the steam sauna. That's not doing the same benefit. So it really is the dry or the infrared. The infrared it does have some significant improvement in terms of detoxification. It does appear to pull out more toxins because the infrared does penetrate through a deeper layer of the tissue. So that is beneficial. But from the research, because as you can imagine, a lot of the research has been done in dry saunas for many, many more years, also before we've had infrared. The dry saunas are quite effective, actually. And I prefer the dry saunas. I'm not against the infrared, but I prefer, if I had an option between the dry high heat sauna and the infrared, I would go for the dry high heat. Mainly because, one, you can sweat significantly with both. Maybe you're pulling out more toxins with the infrared, but you could just sauna again, for an extra little, for one more time a week to get that extra benefit that you might be missing from the dry sauna. But the amazing thing about high heat saunas, because infrareds are low heat generally, but the high heat saunas, it actually boosts your immune system significantly. So you get a big immune support. That's one. Two, you actually get a big increase of these things called heat shock proteins. So the heat shock proteins are released because of that artificial fever that you're getting into. And those actually repair misfolded proteins, like damaged proteins and enzymes and things in your body. So it literally is a repair mechanism that happens systemically. That's great for anti-aging, for preventing damage from building up. Then the third thing that happens is you actually get an increase of BDNF, brain-derived neurotrophic factor. So that's a peptide that your brain releases that causes nerve growth, the nerve growth factor, to increase that connection. So those neurological connections that you see, like the branching of a tree from one nerve to another, for neuroplasticity, for memory improvement, dementia and Alzheimer prevention. You actually get this BDNF released when you exercise. So this is, when people exercise, they get smarter. It's good for their brain. It prevents dementia when you exercise. The BDNF is one reason for that. So you can get that in the sauna. You don't have to just exercise. You can get that way. So you get a good mental brain boost. And you also release a little bit could be a lot, of human growth hormone, which is also quite beneficial for some people to as a bit of an anti-aging, keeps you a little bit younger. Again, we're not overdoing it. It's naturally like human growth hormone. So you get all these benefits from the high heat that you don't get from the infrared. So if you're doing it just for detoxification, either one is really good, and maybe the infrared's a bit better. But if you're doing it for overall longevity and vitality, immune support, and so on, then I prefer the high heat, dry finish saunas.
Great. Thank you so much. And then use soap to wash off the toxin, and cold also is very good to finish with.
Yeah, so everybody has a different tolerance of heat. So what I recommend for most people to do is to never push it past a certain point where they can't tolerate it. So I mentioned about 45 minutes, up to an hour for myself on the high heat, and that's a lot for most people. But what you do is we start with like 5 minutes, maybe of high heat, maybe 10 minutes, depending how long you can, your health, your age, and so on. And then you go and take a cold shower, about 30 seconds. And then you dry off with a towel, like towel dry briefly for 10, 20 seconds, and then you go back in. And you spend another 5 to 10 minutes, as long as you can, comfortably. And then you go do another cold shower, and you do that back and forth for about 3 sessions. That's my preference. So the third time, the very last time, is the shower. So you end in a cold shower, and then you use the soap at the very end. One of the key benefits of doing the hot cold, some people might think it's just to help you last longer, because obviously you're going to get too tired, too fatigued if you stay in the heat. But that's not the only reason. What happens is a lot of people don't realize that when you're in a high heat environment, you actually get a lot of blood flow, moving around. So there's a lot more blood going. But if you go for too long, the body says, okay, it's too hot. Like the outside environment is too hot. So I need to prevent myself from, pretty much, dying. So the blood is restricted all of a sudden to the surface of your skin. So you actually get a reduced blood flow at a certain point, because your body's trying not to overheat, because it knows the outside air is too hot for you. So then you actually get restricted blood flow. You don't want that when you're turning on the heat. You're metabolizing toxins. The fat cells are breaking down. You're getting lipolysis. Toxins are coming out. You want to circulate things. The lymphatics are poor. So then you go do a cold shower. And when you do that cold shower for 30 seconds, well, guess what? The reflex, the instinct is, oh wow, my like the skin is cold. So the body says, I'm gonna heat up that skin so that I don't get too cold, and it actually rushes the blood to the surface of the skin, and the circulation starts all over again. And then if you go for more than a minute, it's the opposite. That's why you don't want to stay longer than 30 seconds to a cold shower. You go more than a minute, then you get reduced blood flow because the body says, I don't want to overcool, so I'm going to reduce the blood flow to the skin, to the surface area. So you just get it just at the right level, and you go back and forth high and cold, so you're always circulating, having a high perfusion and high lymphatic drainage. So this is actually helping the lymphatic drainage too, the hot and the cold. So you're getting a much better result at moving toxins and getting them out than you are with just high heat or just sitting in a sauna for 20 minutes, a half hour. If you're doing the infrared, you can just stay there for a half hour. But you want that contrast to get the lymphatics and get the flow of blood going.
Right. And when you did this, like my sauna is currently under construction for the last 8 months. Did you just go out to, or did you have a sauna in your own home? What did you do?
So I have a sauna in my condo.
Yeah.
So I always will try to make sure that, the environment's clean, so there's no mold as much as you can. And I felt like my condo sauna was pretty good. And even if a lot of saunas sometimes in the public, they could be a little bit moldy depending how they take care of them. But as long as you feel it's relatively clean, you're only in there for a half hour. So you're not getting a big burst of an exposures or something. So then the benefits you get out of it are much better than not. But yes, using free access to your friend's condo. If you don't have a sauna home, or if you have at the gym, if you already have a gym membership, you can use it there for a high heat sauna. The other option is you can invest in an infrared one for home. That's actually, a lot of my patients are doing that, especially now. I'm recommending it to a lot of people during COVID times because all the saunas places are closed. We can't access them. Even mine right now. So I'm looking at buying one myself, an infrared for my condo. Don't have a lot of space here, but I'm gonna move things around and I'm gonna make it happen because we're stuck indoors. We're not exercising as much as we used to. We're not moving a lot, and the saunas can really help keep you in good health during like being stuck at home more often than you want to be.
Yeah, definitely worth the investment.
Yeah.
And the other component that you talked about was colonics. Just tell us about that.
Sure. So colonics is somewhat, not really, but somewhat of a controversial topic. And the reason it's somewhat is because it's not something that we get taught about in school. We get naturopathic or medical doctors too much. And the information is mixed out there, not in the research. The research is pretty clear of the benefits, actually, and the safety. But the information is mixed just in the person from talking to them day to day, because it's not a topic that we hear about too often. So speaking of that, you and I went to school together, actually. So we know we're not taught this. And when I went and took Dr. Walter Crinnion's course, and I heard all about the benefits of all his patients, because he's been in practice for 30 years, and he's extremely diligent and detailed at keeping track of his patient cases. This person reads research articles for breakfast every day with his green tea. That's his hobby. And so he's very much into the research. So he likes to keep very detailed information for his clinical practice. So he went through all of his cases like that. He kept the data for 30 years. I was like, how are you getting these results? I was so excited. And then when we got to the point when he talked about the treatments and how he got these results, and he's like, well, one of the most important things is the colonics. There's like colon hydrotherapy. And I'm like, oh, okay. Do I have to do them myself now, or do I have to prescribe them or recommend them to my patients? And I was like, I don't want to do that. That's not, you want to give a pill. You want to do maybe an IV or a sauna. You want the easy things. You don't want to have to do a colon hydrotherapy because that's not what everybody really wants to do right off the top of their mind. So basically, the research is really clear. And what colon hydrotherapy is, so let me explain that then for your audience, because some people are very well aware of it, some people are not. Basically, most people are aware of an enema, something to do at the hospital all the time. An enema is similar to colonic, but different. An enema is when you take a bag of fluids, of water, and the nurse will, insert it into the rectum, and then you fill up the colon, especially the first part, the sigmoid colon, with like water or whatever the solution is. Sometimes there's medicine in there, and you hold it for a few minutes, 5, 10, 20 minutes, and then you hold that water, and then you go to the washroom, and you have a bowel movement, and you release everything, and it can really help people who are chronically constipated or other health issues, and it can be life-saving for some people. They really need to move things along. Colon hydrotherapy is similar, but it's that there is a machine. Usually there's old school methods, which is like gravity fed, bucket of water, but nowadays there's a machine that's water, it's filtered, it's temperature controlled, and there is a tube within a tube type of technology where the water is going, into the colon, past the rectum into the colon. There's a professional, who's trained, experienced, who does the procedure, and you're laying there. It's fairly actually comfortable. It's not water coming into the colon, but it's also filling up, and it's coming out as well into that tube. So it lasts about 45 minutes to an hour for a session. And instead of having to get up to go to the washroom, what ends up happening is you start to feel like almost like you're having bowel movements a little bit, that sensation, while you're laying there. And then the tube, you start to see, a stool or gas or things start to come out. So that's sort of what happens with a 45-minute appointment. But the way that we did it differently with Dr. Walter Crinnion's experience is you don't just do it once and for a week or once in 2 weeks and that's it. We're not just trying to get the stool out. We're not just trying to clear the portion of the colon. What we're trying to do is we're trying to do it at least 2 times a week. And that's the part where people have to dedicate a bit more time. It's about 2 times a week. And when you do it that often, 2 to 3, 4 sessions, a lot of people, but not everyone, but a lot of people eventually start to get something called a bile dump or a bile release. And what happens is that, our liver filters our blood from toxins and all kinds of things. And then it releases, it produces the bile, the toxins that are going to be stored in the gallbladder. And it gets all, released out at some point when we're eating certain meals to digest our foods, but that's also where the toxins come out. The problem is a lot of that bile and those toxins get reabsorbed, they get recycled. A lot of us have heard about fiber, the benefits of fiber and how fiber can grab toxins and how fiber helps with lowering cholesterol. There's commercials on TV, fiber lowers cholesterol. The reason the fiber works is because fiber grabs and holds onto that bile, those toxins, the cholesterol and other things, and actually stops you from reabsorbing it, and so that you can poo it out and get out of the body. You actually reabsorb about 90 to 95% of some of these toxins and some of this bile over and over again. It's a very well-known, mechanism. And hormones too, getting recycled and so on. So the benefits of the colonic is that when you start getting a bile dump, that means that the colon has actually been fairly cleaned up. There's no more stool or it's all full of water, and it's almost getting, or maybe it is getting to the point of the small intestines, where the small intestines and large intestines interact. And a whole bunch of bile, our understanding is we think it's been stimulated and a reflux happening in the beginning of that session that releases a lot of it. And then it moves rapidly through that to that time. And then towards the end, the water that comes out is no longer, you don't see this like stool or gas. You actually see the water coming out with green or red or yellow or black, like water, and that's the bile that's been dissolved in the water and been eliminated before it gets reabsorbed. So all of a sudden what happens is you get this big release of bile and toxins out of the body, similar to what happens with fiber or activated charcoal or binders, but multiple times more than you would have had with those treatments, all within one session. And then you don't reabsorb it, so your blood circulatory toxins, your blood is not getting as retoxified, and all of a sudden you get up from that table for the next few hours and you're like, wow, I feel sober. Like, it just sobers you up and you're alert, your eyes are more open, you have more energy. I've heard some interesting stories from my patients where they just tell me, they're like you're gonna think I'm crazy, but they're like, I think my vision is better. I think I see sharper after every colonic for a few hours to a day. And I said, that's actually somewhat normal. I hear about that. And if you think about it, when you're clearing the toxins, think about alcohol or breathing in fumes, your vision gets blurry. It's a toxin that causes neuroinflammation, neurotoxicity, for the eyes, for the brain, and so on, and you get blurry vision. But if you remove the toxins, your vision gets clearer. So if people are toxic and there's these toxins are in the system and you drop it, all of a sudden you just feel more sober. You have more clarity, not just mentally, but even like visually, you feel that more clarity. So I've seen that multiple times with my patients, and that sort of reaffirms my experience. Yes, it's not just in my mind, not just a placebo. My patients are saying it over and over again. And again, these are the toxic patients. It doesn't help well, it can help many patients, but it definitely, if there's a toxicity, this is where you see the biggest dramatic change, when you hit those bile releases.
Right? So informative. Thank you. Now, let's go into, say, the three big ones that you see that are, environmental toxins. I know you've talked to me about memory foam, and I think very few are aware of the off-gassing of the mattress. Just tell us a bit more about that.
Sure. So the big toxins that I see in my practice are actually solvents, which is memory foam is one of them, and I'll focus on that first. But just in terms of the big picture, the other one is mold. Like mycotoxins and mold, there's just so much moisture and water damage that people don't realize, and the way homes are built nowadays. That's the other big one. And then after that, depending where people are, it could be pesticides, people living next to golf courses or farms or growing up next to those areas, or eating a really contaminated diet that's really high in certain pesticides. If they're young and they're developing kids, there's a lot of neurotoxicity from there. And then heavy metals, like specifically more mercury from fish and seafood. That's a big source of mercury, much more in my practice that I see than mercury fillings. Maybe we don't have them as much as we used to 20, 30 years ago with the mercury related fillings, but the mercury from fish and seafood is really high. So those are the other ones, but really above all, I primarily see solvents, off-gassing, and mold. So to answer your question about memory foam is an interesting one, because depending on the company, it's not all memory foam, but depending on the company, depending on what they're using to manufacture it, they need to use a lot of solvents to manufacture memory foam at high pressure and high solvents to create that kind of bubble foam structure to make it what it is. Even if you're using sometimes 100% natural latex memory foam, some companies are using that as a foundation, but they still need to use solvents to make it. So then the material gets contaminated in the manufacturing process to make it memory foam instead of just a foam mattress. And what happens is that memory foam tends to off-gas quite a lot. And these solvents, by the way, they're like gasoline type of petroleum-based compounds, like benzene, ethyl benzene, styrene, xylene, toluene, that could be all in there. Very well-known, very well-researched toxicants. Like paint fumes, like breathing in paint fumes or breathing in gas. And you may have heard, or people who are listening to this, they may have bought a memory foam mattress or a pillow at one point, and it may have smelled pretty bad at first. And my patients asking, what does it smell like? Because I've bought some in the past myself, or and I heard from you can just smell it at the store sometimes. It smells like a gas tank, or it smells like a paint can. And sometimes they come with a little message saying off gas for a week to a month before using it. The problem is that it, even after the smell is somewhat gone or mostly gone, it's still off gases for years afterwards. And that's where people can get sick from that. Sometimes you buy them and they don't smell because the company's already off-gassed them a significant amount, or they have a new technology that that doesn't have that same kind of off-gassing, but it's still significantly more than regular foam mattresses from my clinical experience. And what happens is, it's the way you want to think of it, is first of all, let's talk about, I guess, the symptoms. So the first thing is, it's think about off-gassing. So think about breathing in glues, breathing in paint, and how that sensation feels like. So you're getting an exposure of solvents, you're getting dizzy, you're getting brain foggy, so the balance issues, headachy, almost like drinking alcohol. My patients describe it as like a hangover in the next morning when they wake up, or they've been hit by a truck kind of thing, type of sensation. Sometimes neuropathy, actually get burning pain or numbness and tingling in their hands and their feet and their head. from these mattresses or pillows. But I want to be, clear here. Just be careful to say this is not for everyone. There's a lot of people who sleep in memory foam and they're fine. And a lot of my patients that are sick of memory foam, their partners sleeping in the same mattress is totally fine. So it's not 100% for everyone. It depends who you are, what's your starting point. Do you have neuroinflammation beforehand? Do you have extremely poor detoxification pathways? Are you somebody who's chemically sensitive? Do you react to perfumes? Do you react to cleaners, to paint fumes, to smoke, to mold smells? If you are, you're the kind of person that may not benefit from sleeping in a memory foam mattress. You might get sick from it, but you might not get sick at the beginning. You might get sick a week later, a month later, or 6 months later. It's not an allergy. It's a toxicant exposure, right? So it's not like you're sleeping on it and like, oh, I'm feeling sick right away sometimes. Sometimes it's like drinking alcohol. If somebody wants to drink alcohol or smoke, they don't get sick right away. They'll feel great for the first little while until a few months later of drinking or a few years later of drinking, they may start to feel more sick, more toxic. It's been adding up. There is background neuroinflammation from the alcohol. And eventually enough is enough. And the body says, okay, I'm fatigued. I'm really tired. I'm getting all these other symptoms. But you didn't feel that way maybe when you just started having 1 or 2 drinks a day for the first few months. You were great. You're enjoying it. Then it hits you. So this is why people don't realize it's the memory foam. It's like months later, they get sick. And then when they finally get off of it and they do some minor treatments, but they get off of it, they sleep on another mattress for 2 weeks. They suddenly wake up feeling more refreshed, more alert. The neuropathy is gone. And then they go back and they sleep on it again and they get sick again. So we've done this experiment and it's repeatable. So it's not, again, just in their minds. And we've had also some measurements of blood levels of solvents to try to compare to see if that is something that we can measure in toxicity. And we think that there is something there, but it's hard to fully get enough data to say which solvent is it, which mattress, there's all these variables and so on. But yeah, memory foam is a very interesting one because it's so common and so many people are okay with it, but there are enough people that are not okay with it, like maybe 2 to 10% of the population that have some level of symptoms, but they're the ones that we see in our practice that are chronically sick, not getting better, and we're trying to treat them for these symptoms, but they go home and they sleep on that, and they just don't get that much better until they get off of their memory foam for a significant couple of weeks, 4 weeks while doing treatments, or even sometimes when doing no treatments, just getting off of it. Oh, that reminds me. So a key thing to note is, if you're the kind of person that goes away on vacation, and you notice, hey, I feel so much better. My brain fog, my neuropathy, my headaches, everything gets better. Like, we all get better on vacation, but you shouldn't be sick, like at home, and then symptoms clear when you're away. Like significant difference, especially for symptoms that nobody else has. It's not just like, oh, I'm just stressed and I feel better when I'm away. But if your symptoms get significantly better and you come back home and you get sick within a day to 3 days of being back home, there is something in your environment, your home, your work, your diet that's making you sick. And that's the red flag. And this is kind of what we can see with memory foam too. People get better when they're away from it and they come back and they get sick again.
Yeah. I remember just using a small travel pillow that had memory foam. And I don't know why I was using it, but you had told me about the neuropathy and which is tingling.
Yes, numbness and tingling.
Yeah, numbness.
And sometimes burning as well.
Right. And after about 2 weeks, I noticed tingling and I, discarded that pillow right. But yeah, it depends on so many things. And I did wonder why everyone didn't get the symptoms, but we're all individuals and over time, it's just something, I don't know, I would prefer to avoid that one. What mattresses do you suggest?
So generally, I suggest going for a non-off-gassing mattress. Now, there's different companies that are selling different things, but to keep it simple, like a 100% natural latex, natural rubber, from the rubber tree mattress is what you can go with. It doesn't have to be super expensive. It could be any number of companies, but you really want to do your due diligence and ask the company, is it 100% natural latex and nothing else? Sometimes it's mixed with latex and it's mixed with 10-20% memory foam or some other foam. sometimes they advertise it as 100% natural organic mattress. And
Yeah.
it's only the cover that's organic cotton, but the inside is regular polyurethane foam or sometimes memory foam. There's some pillows, I won't mention any brand names, but there are some ones that just advertising 100% organic outside covers, and people think it's organic, but then the pillow itself is memory foam, and they don't realize that the foam is not good for them, but the outside is amazing. But the foam is also what they have to look at as well. So that's my recommendations. There are, there are things you can use like 100%, like or cotton or wool as well, organic as well. There are some more expensive options like horsehair, right? That's a high-end kind of mattress as well, but that's significantly more expensive, than just the latex mattresses.
Yeah, I have noticed the latex. So,
Yeah.
Yeah. Very good. Now tell us about mercury.
Mercury. So mercury is something that a lot of people hear about more often than solvents, right? Like the renovations, the solvents and so on. That's kind of in the background. But mercury, be like, oh yeah, we heard mercury, The first thing that comes to mind is the mercury fillings for a lot of people. And yes, it's a concern, but you need to have, I'm not the kind of person who's needs to be 100% living in a clean bubble. So, because it's really hard to be super clean in this world. We're always supposed to something. So we don't have to be extremes. We don't have to be fanatics. So if somebody has 1 or 2 mercury fillings, I'm relatively okay with that based on my clinical experience and what I've seen. Now, would I recommend that they remove it? Yes. If somebody smokes 1 cigarette a day, I'm not as worried about them smoking half a pack or a pack of cigarettes a day, right? Do I want them to stop that 1 cigarette a day? 100%. It's not good for you, but it's not in the same category as a half a pack or a pack a day. So yes, you want to remove the mercury fillings if you have that option, but that's generally not enough to make people very, very sick if they only had 1 or 2 mercury fillings. If you have 5 or 10, yeah, that can add up over years and really make people sick, especially if you have poor genetics. That can be a big source. The other big one that I find more often in my practice, again, especially because a lot of people are getting the white fillings instead of the silver mercury fillings nowadays, is fish and seafood. So a lot of fish is really high in mercury naturally, not just because it's in the toxin environment, but clean lakes up north in Canada, they're really high in mercury naturally. So you don't have to have a pollution. Now there are coal burning plants. There's a lot of coal burning for energy, and that puts a lot of that combustion material into the environment, and coal burning releases a lot of heavy metals into the environment. It gets into the water, so that contaminate the shoreline significantly. But you don't even need to have that to make it worse. The fish are naturally, they have a very difficult time to clear mercury more than us. Like, we hold on to mercury for a long time, but the fish hold it even longer. So it really bioaccumulates in some fish. The bigger the fish, the more that they live, the more that they eat smaller fish, it bioaccumulates the amount of mercury that's in our body. So we've all heard about fish like tuna. Tuna is really high mercury because it's such a big fish. It lives a long time, and it's eating all the mercury that the other fish have eaten throughout their small life. And that's where we see it. And the mercury that's in fish is actually a methyl mercury. It's an organic mercury, and that's more toxic and harder to remove than the elemental mercury. That's the general one that we might see, in fillings. Again, they're both bad, but they're worse than others. So if you're eating a lot of fish, and the scary thing is, a lot of fish is what I might say is a lot, might not be a lot for somebody else. If you're eating more than once to twice, 2 or 3 times fish a week, or seafood that's high mercury, that's high. And that's measurable in the blood level. So I'm not talking about just high by theoretical. We can actually measure it. And we want the blood levels, of current exposure for mercury to be, less than the 95th percentile. And the 95th percentile in Health Canada, or in Canadian standards, is around 25 when you do a blood test. So 25. The 50th percentile is around 5. So you want it less than 10. You want it to be less than 10, less than 5. But if you're eating, tuna once a week, let's say, your blood levels will be above 25. It could be 30, it could be 40. As we've seen that very often, just once a week of tuna. And if you're I've found that eating salmon, I've had patients, we've been monitoring this data for a long time. That's seen by my colleagues too. Eating 3 salmon meals a week, clean, low mercury salmon, the levels are between sometimes 20 and 25, like at 3 salmon meals a week. So unfortunately, depending on their genetics, especially if you have poor genetics, that's too much for you. Maybe if you have amazing genetics, 3 salmons a week, you might be at 5. But you have poor genetics, 3 salmons a week, you're at 25. And this is where testing is important. You can't just assume that you're okay. It's better to test, get blood levels, know where you are in comparison to the rest of the population. And if you're excelling and you're getting awards for having the highest mercury compared to everybody else around you, you don't want that award. That's not the award you want. You want to excel at being at the lowest mercury level if you're competing, if you're a general population.
Great. And so really the only way to know is to come to a naturopath and get tested.
Yeah, or your medical doctor. Right? Your medical doctor will do this is a blood test. So that can help us to actually talk about the next kind of part of this very important thing about testing for mercury. There are a few types of tests you can do, and I want to stress is the importance of understanding why you're doing some tests and what are you looking at for the data, because most doctors don't realize this. But the blood test in mercury is very, very important. It's for current exposure. And what does that mean? See, the thing is that mercury has a very long half-life. A half-life is the amount of time that it takes for the blood levels or the body levels to drop by half and before it's cleared. So I'll give you an example. A half-life for alcohol is somewhere in like an hour or 2 hours, meaning that if you drink and you get drunk and you wait one half-life, your blood clears and it drops the blood alcohol level, and you wait another half-life, it drops it more and more and more, and then you get sobered up within a few hours. So that's good. You can clear it within a few hours. That's why you sober up. Mercury has a half-life of about 72 days, about 2 months in the blood. That means that you have to wait at least 2 months for your blood levels to drop in half after you last exposure of mercury. It's a long time. So you might be eating tuna, your blood levels might go up to 50, and then it would take you 2 months for it to go down to 25. And then 2 months after that, they get down to 12.5. And then 2 months after that to 6. And then 2 months after that to 3, and so on. So if you keep eating it every week, you're going to be maintaining that blood level for a long time. And you can spike it or bring it down or up and down and so on. The thing is also on top of that is, yes, the half-life is about 2 months in the blood, but that doesn't mean that when it goes down to 0, let's just say you stop eating all mercury, all fish, and you stop any exposure of mercury at all in your environment, and it goes down to 0 in a year. So your blood levels are almost 0, and you're good, you're clean. Most of that mercury hasn't left the body though. Just because the blood levels went down to 0, it doesn't mean that it's left the body, because mercury is one of those, it's not like alcohol, but alcohol clears, it's gone. You won't test it ever again in your tissues. But mercury stays in the tissues. Actually, it attaches, it's a persistent pollutant. It has a much longer half-life in the body. So I think it's estimated about 20% might get eliminated, and about 80% or so you're holding on to it long-term. For that 80%, the half-life for that is estimated at about 10 years in the tissues. 10 years for half-life. And then in the brain, it's estimated at between 20 and 30 years for the brain. So once you're eating mercury and it's building up in your tissues and it's in the brain and it's in the body, and it takes a long time for you to clear it. So you need a different kind of test. You may have a very low blood mercury because you've avoided it for years. But if you had a really high exposure, if there was a spill 10 years ago, 5 years ago, there was a major spill and you had a major mercury exposure, for all those years, even though a year later the blood levels were 0, you're still probably feeling toxicity symptoms, chronic toxicity symptoms from the mercury because it's still in your brain, it's still in the body, and you need a different kind of test to see if it comes out that way.
Right. Wow. And is there a way of pulling it out with certain foods or? So
yes and no. But basically, because the mercury really likes to stay on, that it has a really strong attachment to certain compounds in our tissues, like the sulfur bonds in amino acids. It really likes to be attached to that. You have to kind of get something that pulls it off, and these need to be stronger bonds than what's your body's already attached to it that way. And that's where we come into things like chelators, like chelation agents. A lot of these are pharmaceuticals that your medical doctor or naturopathic doctor, depending where they're at, can prescribe it and monitor it and make sure that you're doing it safely and properly, and you can pull them out over slow. You want to do it slowly over a few months. It can take about 6 months to a year to pull it out. So it's a slow process, but you don't want to rush it, and you can see that it does go out. There are also natural, agents and foods and nutrients that can pull it out. They're a lot slower, but yes, and if somebody doesn't mind just doing it slowly, taking their time and making sure they're living optimal health, they can. So, for example, you want anything that enhances glutathione in your body. And also something called NAC, N-acetylcysteine. That's a really important amino acid that, one, it actually helps improve glutathione levels in the body because it makes glutathione. Glutathione is your body's primary detoxification molecule. But NAC itself can also help pull out mercury as well. It's almost like it acts like a natural chelator. So glutathione will help your body clear mercury significantly more, but not multiple times higher like a chelating agent, but maybe 0.5 times higher, maybe 1.5, maybe 2.5 times higher, depending on how amazing your detox pathways are. Some chelation agents are 10, 20, 30, 50 times higher. So those are where the big guns come in. But if you can increase it by twice or 3 times as much, that's still really, really good from your diet. So yeah, you can increase, foods that increase NAC, NAC. You can also increase broccoli, raw broccoli and raw brassica foods like arugula, cauliflower, Brussels sprouts. But these are the kind of things that you want to eat raw. So blend them up in a smoothie. There's a compound in broccoli. For those of you who are interested, maybe a lot of you already heard about this, it's called glucosinolates. They actually get converted to an active compound called sulforaphane. Very well researched in Johns Hopkins University. They have tons of amazing research there. That when you're eating it, you don't have to take it as a pill. You can eat the broccoli, but it has to be raw. And you can significantly upregulate epigenetically, the expression of your glutathione genes, the enzymes, the glutathione genes that create the enzymes for detoxification. We're talking significant elevation, not just a small amount. Like we're talking 50 to 100% increase of toxins from broccoli sprout smoothies or raw broccoli smoothies a few times a week. So that's really the big one. You really want to increase your raw broccoli. And because when you heat it up, the enzyme, for those of you who are interested, it's called myrosinase. The enzyme myrosinase that activates the chemically changes the glucosinolates to sulforaphane gets destroyed. When you heat something up, it destroys the enzyme, and the enzyme doesn't work anymore, and you just get zero sulforaphane in your food. So you're eating the broccoli, getting all the benefits of the broccoli, the nutrients. It's an amazing food, but you don't get any of the detoxification benefits that I'm talking about right now. So having a broccoli smoothie a few times a week with whatever other ingredients you want to make it taste delicious, hopefully, is really important to pull out mercury, but also solvents like benzene and other toxins that we just talked about.
Yeah. What about chlorella?
So chlorella is actually really, really good at binding mercury. And it's something that we're taught in school. And it is useful, and I do use it. And thanks to you for bringing that up. But I don't use it in the way that a lot of doctors are using it. And the reason is that, yes, chlorella binds mercury great. The problem is that, and actually explain it to your listeners, chlorella, the reason chlorella binds mercury is because the cell membrane of the chlorella, which is a blue-green algae, when you break it up, is the cell membrane almost acts like a fiber. It doesn't get absorbed, it stays in the gut, and it acts like a fiber in a way to toxins, specifically heavy metals. It really binds them well. So you grab those heavy metals and you poo them out. You just don't absorb them. Well, the thing is that it doesn't get into the blood. So yeah, you can take a lot of chlorella, but if the mercury is in the blood or it's in the tissues or in the brain, it's like taking fiber, trying to pull it out from the blood, but it doesn't. It stays in the gut. And so it's a misunderstanding that chlorella will actually pull the mercury from your compartments, from your tissue compartments, your blood, the brain, or the body. What it does do is it binds mercury in the gut or in your diet. So every time my patients eat, or every time I go out and I eat or home a high mercury fish meal, if I go have some sushi and I want to enjoy my life and I have a good meal of sushi, I try to avoid tuna, but let's just say I do eat some high mercury fish. What I do is I take some chlorella with that meal, and it binds the mercury in that in the gut, and it stops me from absorbing it, and then that lowers my blood levels. And I can't stress enough how important this is as well to prevent you from getting sick in the long term, because I want to give you this example of this one very well published study for this exact same scenario. And what they did is they took two groups of rats, and they actually, and one group of rats were pregnant. So what they did is, this is where, for people who don't like research on rats, this is sort of unfortunately the nature of medicine. Is always going to be research somewhere, it has to be done. But they took the two groups of rats and they exposed them to mercury in their water for both groups. And one of them, they gave them chlorella as a part of their diet. Well, the group that had the chlorella as a part of their diet, because it was absorbing the mercury that they were drinking and in the gut level, when they did the test and they found out how much mercury got into the brain of the rats, into the body, or into the fetus, there was a 60 to 80%. So 60 to 80% reduction of mercury absorbed into the rats that were eating the chlorella. That's huge, 60 to 80%. So it is very effective at mercury binding, but it needs to be used properly to pull out, to make sure that you don't absorb it, but it won't be useful as much as far as I know. Maybe there's new research, but from my experience and what we learned in Dr. Walter Crinnion's course and so on, and other research I published, it's not actually pulling it out from the tissues, it's pulling it out from the gut environment.
Right. So it's almost, you could use it preventatively from it going into the tissues.
Exactly, yes.
And I wish we had all known that 10 years ago.
Yeah, and because how many times have we been enjoying our fish meals, and it's, we're eating this great sushi, it's delicious, or tuna steak, or ahi, it's like, okay, I should just take a couple of pills of this chlorella, 1 to 2 grams of chlorella, and that should be a significant reduction of absorption.
1 to
2. Yeah, but around, that's what I tell people, about 1 to 2 grams. I'm sure if you take more, you might get more benefits, but chlorella can make people gassy or bloated. So yeah, you hit that threshold where 1 to 2 grams is more than enough for most people.
Right. Aviad, so much important information. Leave us with one tip, one mind tip, because I know you are an avid meditator, and you've influenced me in many ways in our lives. Just leave us with one tip.
Sure. Yeah, so with regards to meditation, I used to do a ton of meditation when I was younger, for about 10 years, almost daily, anywhere between 5 minutes a day to up to an hour or two a day, in total. And the research in meditation is so clear. Like we know all the benefits. Nobody can deny it anymore. It's one of the most important things next to like exercise and clean, healthy diet and optimal diet, right? So we can combine that together. It really boosts your health. With regards to meditation, what I found for myself, this is for me, getting into a busier lifestyle where I used to meditate more often, and not everyone can do that. I can't do that anymore. That's the thing. I can't do that anymore. But what I found out is really what you want to do is you want to find out after your work, you really worked on meditating and you know what meditation is for you and the benefits. You want to find out, how do you get into a state of being in the meditative state all the time, right? 24/7. Meditation is not something like, ultimately when you talk to, to teachers or masters, that have meditated for a while, many years, they tell you that the goal is not just to learn to meditate intensely for whatever amount of time, but it's that you want to be able to take that mindset and that benefits that you get and actually have it all the time. So that some people might, compare it to prayer. And people are spiritual looking at prayer. They want to be in prayer, a state of prayer, and love and support of other people around them all the time. But meditation is, another way of looking at it. So like you wanna be very mindful all the time. You're on the bus. You wanna bring in that inner state. Like once you know what that meditation state feels like, you can just pull yourself inwards calm the mind down and bring that meditation state at that moment. Same thing at work when you're talking to colleagues, or, for me, patients, or talking to family, or there's an argument going on. You literally want to bring in that meditation state at that moment to bring that inner peace, the inner peace in the midst of chaos that all of us have heard about and are trying to achieve. You bring that in and you maintain that as much as you can. Now, for me, that's the ultimate goal, is to actually always catch myself every hour, every half hour, twice a day, whatever it is, realizing, oh, I've slipped. I've gone away from that meditative state, and I bring it back. And it takes sometimes 10 seconds. Sometimes it takes 2 minutes. But I don't have to sit there and close my eyes. I just do it. I'm talking to people. I retrain myself to say, hey, I'm talking to you right now. And I actively do what I've learned to do internally, mentally, physically, like relax my muscles, relax my jaw, and breathe a little bit differently, but change my thoughts so I can bring that meditation state. And what you're going to find out is that, yeah, it might be hard at first to do, but then as you do it often, more and more often, it's like any other muscle in the body, just like meditation, but you're doing it outside of meditative state position. You do it, it becomes easier and easier and easier. And then you end up actually slipping into it all the time. So you do get into a state where more than half, or 75% of the day, you're actually in that very peaceful, peace in the middle, like inner peace in the midst of chaos kind of state. And that can give you benefits, on so many areas of your life, from your work, from your personal relationships, from your inner relationship to yourself, from, that inner health, you're reducing stress, lowering your blood pressure, and then achieving that growth. We all want to grow as human beings, as our, inner emotional, mental, spiritual potential, of whatever it is that you resonate with. This is actually the key thing that I think anybody can benefit from, is to strive for that inner meditative state all the time, not just for 5 minutes a day, but like all the time.
Beautiful. And then you're walking your path, connecting to who you are. I can't add to what you said, Aviad. It was beautiful. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you, Jayne.
Aviad, I just want to acknowledge you and this incredible information that you brought forward today. And I know it came with a lot of study and caring. And thank you so much for being on the show.
Yeah, you're welcome. And thank you for having me again.
And for everyone out there, I just want to remind you, don't forget, don't give away your power to anyone else.